Hello, everyone. Oh, hang on a sec. Start my camera. Hello. Greetings from my ever familiar kitchen. Hi, Lady Pegasus. I have a problem grabbing a quick shower. Sink shower, please. Well, just don't pretend you're on a cruise ship while you're in the shower. That's all I can say. Hi, Cherie. Good to see you. I know it's been a while since I've done a Smooth Criminal Live. I kept scheduling it, and then life just kept getting in the way of other plans. So I think it's kind of appropriate, though, that I'm going live today because the report was handed down on Friday regarding the Special Commission of Inquiry, which we're going to have a look at in a bit of detail tonight. And I think we all, everyone who's been following this series, The Wreck of the Ruby Princess, I think we all deserve a gold star because it was quite a while ago that it looked like New South Wales Health were going to be considered the biggest fucker-uppers of the whole fucker-uppery, and it turns out they have been. So, yay, we called it. Extraordinary situation today with New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian apologising for the debacle. And I nearly went live a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, when it came out that Border Force and the New South Wales Health Authority were not culpable at all. So we're going to have a bit of a chat tonight about the outcome of the Commission of Inquiry. It is not the end of my fascination with this story. We still have the Shine Lawyers. I've just gone completely blank. The class action with Shine Lawyers, where passengers are suing the cruise liner or the cruise company. And, of course, we've still got the police investigation as well. Now, that's due out next month, but the police have said from the start that it may never be revealed to the public what they decide. But, obviously, if charges are laid, I suspect we'll have a fair idea of the outcome of the investigation. Hi, Scout Inquirer. Welcome to your first Smooth Criminal Live. Bit different from my other channel, Yum Tours, where I'm busily catfishing Nigerian scammers. This isn't as funny, but, I mean, we'll have some giggles and interesting conversation along the way. And, yeah, Lady Pegasus, there was a lot on the news today about Gladys apologising. Quite an unusual outcome, really. Just want to jump over to Facebook as well and say g'day to anyone watching over there. You are more than welcome to come over to the land of the YouTube. So I'm just going to copy the link. And anyone who is watching on Facebook, if you would like to migrate over to YouTube, you can stay on Facebook. But if you would like to come over to YouTube, you can just click on that link. And if you've got a Gmail address, you will be good to go. And then you can participate in chat over there. I will try to jump backwards and forwards. So apologies in advance to the Facebook people in case I end up having lively conversations with the folk over on YouTube and neglect you a little bit. Some of you may know the story. Most of you will, I think. Hi, Francesca. Didn't mean to miss out saying g'day to you in the list. Some of you may be familiar. Hey, Claire Bear, how nice to see you here on the Smooth Criminal Podcast channel. Oh, guys, bit of exciting news about my podcast too. I'm being interviewed about it tomorrow night on ABC 936. It's a Tasmanian ABC radio station, but they stream live online. So let me grab the link for that one as well. It'll be 9:10 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, and I'm going to be interviewed by the fabulous Mel Bush, who, when I did Breakfast Radio, she was at one point in time, she was actually my co-host, but for most of it, she was in the newsroom, and an incredible friendship was formed, and she's now doing the nighttime show at the ABC in Hobart. So she's interviewing me tomorrow about the podcast. So make a note about that. I'll probably do a little reminder video on this channel and drop the link in my description as well. If anyone wants to tune in and hear my fabulous, beautiful friend Mel and one of my favourite work colleagues ever, and I having a little bit of a chat about my podcast. I did mention I'm also catfishing scam baiters. I'm scam baiting and catfishing Nigerian scammers on my other channel. And she's like, we might have to do an interview about that as well. So, I know, Claire Bear. It's just interesting because this channel, I don't get the same sort of numbers watching, and it sort of fascinates me who comes to this channel as well. But yeah, so that interview will be tomorrow night at 9:10, and even if you can't make it tomorrow night, the links for the shows stay up for a week. So, yeah, if you want to tune in, I think I'm up to episode 40 this week of my podcast. So it's a bit exciting. Might get some new listeners. And I'll definitely mention this channel as well, even though the bulk of my listeners for my podcast listen on podcasting platforms. I love that some of you guys listen to it on YouTube. Hi, Michelle. Good to see you, gorgeous. So, yeah, thought we'd just have a little usual Wreck of the Ruby Princess chat. More than happy to drop the StreamYards link into chat if anyone wants to come up and talk about it in a little while. We'll have a bit of a discussion at the end if anyone feels like taking a link. But, I mean, the first story that's kind of interesting, like after the report was handed down on Friday, and we are going to look at that I mean, I'm not going to go on about it for hours, but it's really interesting for those of you who didn't see the news on Friday and you don't know the outcome. Anyone that has missed this story or doesn't really know what happened, there will be a bit of a recap in some of the articles we're going to look at tonight. Fear not. So we've got cruise ships already sort of there's already cruise ships in other parts of the world cruising around the ocean, but there's a story in mainstream Australian media this afternoon that cruise companies that are set to sail in 10 weeks have been slammed for their bookings. A current affair actually they covered the story tonight for anyone who watches that show, which I don't, but there's a lot of Aussie cruisers that are counting down the days till they can get on board, and I think they're all batshit crazy. But anyway, so that was an interesting story to come out with what's been going on with the inquiry. We'll have a chat shortly. The first thing we'll do is have a look at the report and the findings of it. Then we'll have a little bit of a chat about Premier Gladys Berejiklian apologising, the Premier of New South Wales, for the debacle. There's also an article that goes into a little bit more detail about the New South Wales Health's involvement in all of this and refers to inexcusable mistakes. And despite the report being handed down on Friday, I have also got an article of one of the passengers who still wants answers. They're not happy. And then if we've got time, just a quick update on what's happening with the class action. But as far as I can tell at the moment, they're still just accumulating witnesses and statements and claimants for the class action through Shine Lawyers. So there's a bit to cover. But of course, I think the main thing is the outcome of the Special Commission of Inquiry. And the thing that's really interesting about it is that while New South Wales Health is certainly pinpointed in the report as the most culpable party, the report was very clear in saying that there weren't any major mistakes really at all. It was just a series of bad mistakes, but nothing. So it wasn't like anyone intentionally did this to be dickheads. But the problem was that everyone was a bit blasé about it all, and that's how it all happened. You know, and even with these sort of experts and professionals making decisions, it was just a string of people that were just a little bit too chilled out about it all, rather than them saying there was one particular incident that triggered the whole debacle. It was a series of fuck-ups by a lot of individuals, including the ship's doctor, Ilsa von Bad News. Hi, Anne-Marie. Good to have you here. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Everything you do is exciting. Claire, but you're too sweet. Lady Pegasus. Yeah, I wouldn't be going. I've never been on one, and I definitely won't be going on one now. I was pretty critical about cruise ships, as you all know, if you've been following the series before this even happened. I had a bit of an issue with them. So I used to enjoy being a tour guide and taking busloads of tourists off cruise ships out to Bonnarong, which is our 24-hour animal rescue place here. I really enjoyed that. I loved showing off Tasmania, and I did that job for 2 summers, and I absolutely loved it. It was a great job, but I frequently sort of said to them, how can you go on a cruise? And everyone I spoke to said, we love it. It's all paid for. There's 24/7 food. There's this never-ending buffet of food. I think the buffets are a thing of the past. They loved the onboard entertainment, all the little places the ships went to. I know Cherie's been on some cruises, but hers all sounded spectacular. But, you know, even just stories of gastro outbreaks on cruise ships was enough to put me off them. So what I'm going to do is, and g'day everyone over in Facebook land. Like I said, if you want to click that link, you can join us over in YouTube land. So I'm going to go to The Age and an editorial, which is a really lovely sort of summary of the report and lessons to be learnt. And I think it's a really good one to start with, because it just summarizes. Yeah, who wants to hook up with a German incubator? Exactly. Doing really well, Anne-Marie. I hope you are too, gorgeous. It was a great job, Lady Pegasus. I had a lot of fun with it. There was one time, I'm looking at the camera, but I'm not even on screen anymore. There was one time where it was leading into a state election and my brother was running to get re-elected, and he was the Premier of Tassie at the time. And so I got everyone, I was like, right, we've got an election going on and you guys are on the bus for the good team. Every time we go past a blue sign, you've got to cheer, do a Mexican wave, clap your hands, squeal, whatever. But if you see a red sign or a green sign, you've got to boo. And I had them because there was, you know, election billboards all over the place. I had this whole busload of Americans cheering for Will every time they saw a blue banner or blue placard. It was quite fun. Oh, your dad's addicted to cruising. Yeah, and look, I can see why a lot of people find it a great way to travel. The problem with me is I even before I discovered Anthony Bourdain, but I was always into the road less traveled kind of traveling and not having an itinerary. I'm very anti-itineraries when I travel. You know, like I might go to a country for a month, and like I did with Vietnam the first time I went there for 2 weeks and went straight to Hoi An and got there, and it's like Hoi An has everything I want for this holiday. So my plans to explore Vietnam were shelved, and I just spent the entire time in that one place and got to know the locals and made friends, and then I ultimately moved there. So yeah, I think a lot of people like the organization of cruises and everything's done for them and they've got everything they need on board and they go to great places. They get to see a lot of places in a short space of time that would have probably cost them 3 times as much to do it on their own, but not bagging people that do it. I'm just not one of those peeps. If I had the money to do the QE2 or something, I might consider it. Yeah, not to mention the drunk men. God, that Diane Brimble case still haunts me too. I think that had a bit of an impact on my feelings about cruise ships as well. So this article, and I will jump backwards and forwards between this and chat because I'm really keen to see it. It is an editorial, but I think it's pretty interesting. Cursed ship has sailed, but there are lessons to be learnt. And this was in or published online yesterday evening. So I'm not going to read it. I'm going to kind of skim it and pick a few points and have a bit of a chat about it. So But if anyone wants to, it is the Age online website where this article is. But I mean, in the summary of this editorial, they say that the report, it's blow by blow account of how the calamitous decision unfolded that determined the risk of passengers and crew having COVID-19 was low. I mean, this is a photo of the day that they disembarked and all those people were just mingling and hanging out. I don't know the faces of all of the victims. Some of the information's still not publicly available, but wouldn't it be awful if someone in that photo is no longer with us? It's quite possible. But this is the bit that I found really interesting that I touched on just before. There wasn't one tragic moment or meeting or fateful judgment that led to the assessment. It was more mundane than that, much more a culmination of mistakes that led to the outcome, which included the infection of more than 700 passengers and 202 crew. But at the centre of that process was the New South Wales Health expert panel that were in charge of making the risk assessment. The report's very clear that there wasn't anything malicious about it or political interference at play, or even that the expertise of the panel, the expert panel from New South Wales Health, was in doubt. But it was all these procedural errors that one by one, in their own right, wouldn't have been major, but the cumulative effect of several mistakes is what led to this massive debacle. So things like the revised criteria of a suspected COVID-19 case weren't taken into account. There was the critical paperwork that wasn't updated, and we all remember there was a fair few issues with paperwork. There were emails that were incorrect, and also the medical logs that were provided were outdated. But in addition to that, those documents weren't properly assessed. And like the report indicates, and this editorial indicates time and time again, when the alarm bells should have been ringing, they either ignored or were ignorant of the warning signs. But this is where it's interesting, and I like this editorial because it's fair, because it mentions that the testimony from the panel members paints a picture of the rationale that was used to justify the decision. So things like over in Wellington, where they tested 5 patients for COVID, or passengers for COVID-19, they all received negative results. When they looked at all of the passengers and where they'd all been, none of them had been to major pandemic hotspots, and less than 1% of those on board had shown influenza-like symptoms. And I think that's all pretty relevant. And I think also another thing that's relevant is that this particular cruise was at sea when WHO declared a global pandemic, which, they've been criticised too for doing that a little bit late. We did have the Diamond Princess debacle unravelling at the time, but you can see how those facts would have made everyone a bit blasé, I guess, about it. And I think it was fair of the editorial to sort of point that out, that there are some logical explanations, but unfortunately too many people kind of made those conclusions and were a bit blasé about it all, and we all know what happened as a result. And the editorial goes on to say they're not an excuse, but they are a timely reminder of how bad judgments can be made by qualified people with the best of intentions and based on assumptions that are not without validity. So, yeah, it's an interesting account. It goes on to talk about what the scale and scope of government responsibilities are and how far that goes beyond their normal duties. Because like with the Ruby Princess, this stuff can result in life and death consequences. And when significant mistakes are made, there does need to be transparency and accountability. There's a bit of a nod to Brett Walker's SC, who headed the inquiry, and he should be commended for his work, according to the editorial. And I've got to agree with that. There was nothing that came out during us following this that um, indicated he was anything but fair. And he was actually fantastic. You know, he was being sort of told to keep it private. He's like, nope, this is all going to be public. The public has a right to know. He didn't let anyone sort of tell him what to do. He told ScoMo to pull his head in at one point, even though they are apparently close associates and they're both members of Hillsong. And the only time I'd really heard of him before this was his involvement with the George Pell case. So my view of him was like, this guy's kind of interesting and hardcore. But yeah, he really should be commended. I think he handled it really well. But during such extraordinary times, what of the doctrine of ministerial responsibility that's central to the Westminster parliamentary system? Should the buck always stop with our political leaders? Fighting a pandemic's not for the faint-hearted, and the virus can thrive when even the smallest of errors are made. Now, it then goes on to talk about the Victoria's hotel quarantine debacle, which is recommencing. I've ummed and ahed about whether or not I want to follow it, and I've kind of decided I don't. I think it's another massive debacle, which is pretty interesting. I've contemplated following it, but I think in light of the fact we still have the class action and the police investigation, which includes homicide detectives, still looking into the Ruby Princess debacle, I've decided I'm not going to do the quarantine debacle, but it's probably something I will follow just out of curiosity anyway. And I may go live every now and then to have a little bit of a chat about it, but it's not something I'll follow with as much commitment as I have this one. So, and interesting, there should also be an acceptance while accountability and responsibility are fundamental tenets of our political system, government departments and their political masters are bearing an extremely heavy burden in managing this health and economic crisis. And finding that balance could be crucial in how well Australia weathers this pandemic. And I agree, like, this is unprecedented, to quote the Tasmanian Premier, who says it all the time, but he's so right. It is unprecedented and everyone is kind of learning as we go. And, you know, here we are now in August, and this pandemic was declared in March, and places are still making mistakes and still learning. And the virus is mutating and doing all kinds of crazy shit. So there has to be a bit of, I guess, empathy for politicians and everyone who is sort of trying to get on top of this pandemic, because I'm certainly not going to say I could have done a better job. I think everyone is really doing the best that they can. That doesn't take away from the fact that with the Ruby Princess debacle, people clearly didn't do the best they could. So that was that little article. Curious to see how everyone's doing in chat and how you feel about it. Yep, management communication problems. And the thing is, you know, we've talked about so many of the different alarm bells and things that were happening, and other departments were brushing it off. And, you know, things like the passengers that were met by ambulances in the middle of the night and taken off the ship, who were carted by paramedics in full hazmat outfits and taken straight to a dedicated COVID ward at a hospital. Woot, woot. We're not letting everyone off the ship until the test results of the passengers come back, and then they let them all off before they came back. I'm trying to think of some other ones. Even the disembarkation, they had, by then everyone knew about social distancing and all the rest of it, but they had all the crew members lined up and all the passengers walking past it, all hugging and kissing and holding hands, and then they were just sort of sent out into the wild, you know, and catching taxis and buses and planes and sitting on planes, flying overseas, later at the other end tested positive. It was, it was just one, it was like the domino effect. It was just so many fuck ups. I agree, Cherie. Like, if you'd made those mistakes, yeah, you would have been deregistered. But if you'd made one small mistake that was part of a chain of a heap of other small mistakes, you might have had your bum kicked, but you wouldn't have lost your job, correct? Like, if you individually kept making a series of mistakes that had pretty dramatic outcomes, then yeah, I imagine you would be deregistered. But what if you were just one of 10 people who made small mistakes that were based on, well, the rationale for making those mistakes was it was kind of logical and not factoring in this pandemic that was unraveling, you probably wouldn't have been deregistered. Thank you, Ivor, for giving everyone the lesson on when I said who or WHO. Apparently they don't like being called who because, it's also a bloody gossip magazine, but such a blame game. And I agree, they shouldn't have berthed here. And they're actually told not to let the ship berth and let it disembark. But in they came, and the next thing, go free, our young children. And then they gave the boat a bit of a scrub down and boarded another bunch of people. Well, were planning to. That got stopped. But after the first cruise, they really shouldn't have let the second cruise, which was the Rekov cruise, they shouldn't have even let that ship sail out of Sydney Harbour that day. But off it went. Yeah, there were complacencies, but it was interesting. Like, I think when we were looking into the inquiry as it was happening, and each day the hearings and what had come out of it, like I pinned New South Wales on my board as the major culprit. They just were just constantly responsible for shit that they shouldn't have fucked up. So it was interesting, that earlier or late last week that they made a point with the report of saying that Border Force and the Department of Home Affairs were not culpable at all. There's an analogy in aviation, Swiss cheese, all the holes lined up, but accountability seemed to have flown out the window. Yeah. But it started off as such a riveting thing, didn't it? Because if you think back to when we started covering this, everyone was pretty much going, this has been a monumental fuck up, but it's their fault. And there was just finger pointing going all over the place. And as the weeks unraveled and we kept following it, suddenly there were new players being thrown under the bus. And it was really interesting watching it. I don't think anyone has written a book that had me as captivated as this story as it unraveled. It was like with every day there was a new, what the fuck? And the blame game part of it was fascinating. So I agree. I don't think they should either at all. And I mean, in this instance, people died. In fact, there's one article which is slamming New South Wales Health that confirms 28 deaths are directly connected to the Ruby Princess. Up until last week, they hadn't budged on the 20 Australians and 2 international passengers, but the confirmed number, and in fact, they're still saying that at least 28 deaths and 662 coronavirus cases. Pardon me. But New South Wales Health got slammed the most, and we'll have a look at that article in a minute. Thought we might just quickly have a little look on the ABC News website at Gladys's apology. I might get a little pat on the bum for being naughty and sharing this. Hey, Mel. G'day. Exactly, Ivor. Yeah, the pressure on them and all the rest of it was, to get the ships turned over and back out. It was pretty obvious, even from the cruise statements and stuff, how quick it was. Yo, sup? I showered today. It was glorious. What was that? Have I missed something, Mel Mel? Do you not normally shower every day? You washed your hair twice? I feel like I've missed some news. Or it's just a random announcement and maybe you don't have a shower every day. I don't know. I'm going to wait and see what your response is to that. Yeah, the blaming of each other. I know, because they all knew they had blood on their hands, and people just kept dying. And then people overseas started dying. And then Tasmania had the cluster up in the northwest. It was all directly linked to the Ruby Princess. Places were all over Australia. And well, the class actions got passengers from Canada, the UK, the US, and New Zealand included. Oh, okay. The hot water system blew up. Shit. Oh, God, you would have loved your shower. You probably didn't want to get out of it. I'm surprised you're not still in it. But so happy. That's the worst. I'm really lucky here that I don't have a hot water system anyway because I'm on tank. But when trying to think, there was a time that we had a blackout and I wasn't able to have a shower. But I've got a neighbour, and she had power for some reason, and then on another occasion she didn't and I did. So it's nice knowing I've got a place to go. But there's also showers down at the surf club if I really got stuck. But there's nothing like being able to have a shower again when you haven't had one. You feel like you've been camping for a month, even though it's only been a couple of days. You did baby wipes, yeah. And the problem, why does this shit always happen in winter when it's cold, Because in summer, like if my something happened with my gas, if I'd run out of gas or whatever, back before I had a proper massive gas thing and hydronic heating and everything put in, I used to slug the little 9-kilo bottles backwards and forwards between my local shops every couple of weeks. But in summer, for some reason, I always had heaps of gas, but my gas bottles always ran out in the middle of winter at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, pitch dark, 3 degrees outside, shampoo in my hair, and I'd have to bloody go down under the house and connect up a new bottle. It was just, it never happened at the right time, a convenient time. Were you smelly melly? Yeah, isn't it incredible too, Mama, when you do get an opportunity to finally have something like that and you realise how much you appreciate it and what a luxury it really is? It's quite, sometimes just having that, not having access to something for a few days and then the reality of people never having access to it. So, yeah, good point. Ivor. Plumbers' rates over the weekend would have been horrific. So what I might do, now that we've got a squeaky clean Mel in the chat as well. Yeah, you had to do the bottles as well. Well, I used to slug them because I only had like the 9 kilos or the 8.56 or whatever they are, the little barbecue ones. And then I got sick of it after the first 3 years. I kind of liked it at the start. I was like, I'm a bit earthy and a bit feral. I'm off the grid and I'm slinging bottles and going down to the shops and bringing them back up and reconnecting them. But then after a while, I just got so sick of it. So then I ended up converting to like a 45 kilo cylinder, which I think converting over to that, like all the attachments and everything had to change, probably cost about $600. And I only had that for about 3 months when I got the quote and put the hydronic heating in. So And now I haven't looked back. I've got this big, like a gigantic, it still looks like a barbecue gas cylinder or gas bottle, but it's a big one. And every 3 weeks, the truck pulls up out the front, tops her up, and off he goes over winter. And then in summer, I'm lucky if I see him 3 times. Yeah, you could have gone straight to Tays. And again, another luxury that we have other people that have showers that we could go and hang out with. Well, no, you're not a pussy. You just want to be clean. I mean, I used to love going camping and just how gross you get. I used to try and make a point of like not bathing per se, well, sort of, but like a bush sort of bathing in a creek or a river or whatever, but you still never felt really clean, even if it was somewhere on the coast. And you sort of took your daily swim as your shower. But it does get to a point where you're like, I just want to clean myself. And the thing that always starts to annoy me is an itchy scalp before anything else. I'm like, I just want to wash my hair. Josh is loving it. All right, so I'm going to play New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian's apology today. I haven't watched it yet, so we're all seeing it together for the first time. I'm kind of curious to see what she says.
Can I now apologise unreservedly to anybody who suffered as a result of the mistakes that were outlined in the report undertaken by individuals within the health department or the health agency, and I extend that apology unreservedly, in particular to the 62 people who got the virus in secondary or tertiary way, those 62 people who weren't on the ship but somehow contracted the virus as a consequence of that disembarkation. And I want to say I can't imagine what it would be like having a loved one or being someone yourself who continues to suffer and experience trauma as a result. And I want to apologise unreservedly to anybody who is continuing to suffer or has suffered unimaginable loss because of mistakes that were made within our health agencies. Fortunately, Mr. Walker says, and I want to stress, that there weren't systemic issues. He has full confidence in those agencies continuing to work on the pandemic, and I think we can say that since that time we have learned a lot. We have learned so much since those horrible mistakes. And as the Premier, again, I want to apologise to anybody, especially those 62 individuals who got the virus as a secondary or tertiary contact because of the way in which those passengers disembarked the ship, and to anybody who continues to suffer loss and trauma and angst and health concerns as a result of those mistakes.
How do we feel about that, Groovers? Do we think Gladys is going to get re-elected? Do you think it will have an impact the next election? And g'day to anyone watching on Facebook too, by the way. But yeah, how do we feel about that? And if anyone wants to take a link, if anyone's got any strong views that they want to express about this, feel free to jump up. It's good to have a bit of a chat. These lives only go for an hour, so we've got like 20 minutes left. I feel empathy for the premiers as they are taking instructions from health experts, but the buck stops with them. I agree. And, you know, I mean, you can see what happens in Tasmania with Peter Gutwin. You know, he reiterates all the time that, you know, that it's the health experts that are making the calls, but he's the one that cops the barrage of abuse. And I don't know why the general public can't just, you know, soak that information in and realise that at the end of the day, if the health experts are saying don't open the borders yet, don't stop social distancing or whatever, he's the messenger, really. The problem with Gladys, though, is that Gladys, at the start of it all, was really cocky, pointed the finger at everyone else under the sun, and then started mouthing off at other premiers for not opening their borders. And she was pretty vocal and also sort of did massive backflips and changed her tune. And I don't think she was consistent. And I think in the time of a global pandemic, you need consistency. And you don't need your premier in the midst of something that was a monumental fuck up, that even she admitted was a monumental fuck up, pointing the finger at other people. You know, you do look to your premiers and prime minister as the leaders. Yes, the decisions that are being made in terms of restrictions and so on are coming from health experts, but she still has a role as the leader of the parliament in New South Wales. And I think her attitude at times, I mean, I could be wrong, but it came across as being, well, she was inconsistent, but also, you know, pointing the finger and not sort of saying, as Premier of New South Wales, we need to get to the bottom of this, and whoever's responsible, then, you know, we'll deal with that when the time comes. I think that probably would have gone down a lot better. And for her to be yelling at other premiers for not opening their borders, I mean, the Western Australian Premier was like, yeah, as if we're going to listen to the woman who let everyone off the Ruby Princess. So I think, you know, that's possibly it's, you know, good on her for apologising today, but I think she was a bit inconsistent and she was personal. You know, she was blaming other people. A lot of us in New South Wales are not happy with Gladys. I don't envy any premiers either. I mean, I'm incredibly closely related to one, as you know, an ex-premier, and I don't envy them at all. But I still think if you look at our premier, he's maintained a very consistent stance. He didn't start blaming people with the Ruby Princess cluster we had. And I think she was very quick to admit it was a fuck up and let's see what comes out of the inquiry and leave it at that. I don't think it was her place to say it's a fuck up, but it wasn't our fault, because it turns out if you're going to look at the party that may, or the party in terms of all the different parties involved in this debacle, the party that made the most mistakes was the New South Wales Health Department, which is part of her government. She was Transport Minister prior to Premier and made a lot of mistakes there too. I mean, look, I agree. You're never going to please everyone when you're Premier. But I think in terms of any kind of crisis, people look to you for guidance. I can also say that we've got to factor in and remember that she'd been dealing with the bushfires in January and then this happened. She's not had a great year, right? In terms of being a premier. I mean, I had my brother here last weekend and we were still saying, you know, that his timing was fantastic, that he resigned in January. And then in February, of course, the whole COVID-19 thing started to take off and his timing was impeccable. But, you know, if you've got to look at what Gladys has dealt with this year, the fires were, you know, insane and stressful and so tragic. And then straight after that, she's barely had time to take a breath and bang. So, you know, like I know everyone's human. I think the problem was that she was unfortunately just one of many passing the buck. And to just say there's been a massive fuck up, it's, you know, at the moment it could be anyone, or not even say that. There's been a massive fuck up. There's going to be an inquiry. Let's see what comes out in the inquiry, rather than blaming ScoMo and the ship and everyone else. That's correct too, Sheree. And I mean, you know, that like that editorial we looked at earlier from The Age, it acknowledged that everyone's learning as they go with this. So no one's going to hold a grudge if people make mistakes while they're learning how to deal with this unprecedented event. But to pass the buck so vocally, when at the time people really just needed clear leadership and focus from her. But I wouldn't do a job, and I certainly wouldn't claim for a second I'd do a better job. We're just looking at this from a critical point of view as outsiders. But I do feel for her. She probably hasn't had a good night's sleep this year. You know, kudos to anyone who puts their hand up to do it. But I think you need to be solid and grounded, and that's why I can't really fault our Premier here in Tasmania, because he's been consistent from the start. Even if he's said things that people have been pissed off with, you can't fault him in terms of maintaining the same stance. And even when he's questioned about things that have happened, you know, we've had inquiries here and people have looked into things that have happened. They're constantly trying to improve the systems. They're constantly learning. And like I said, even this bloody virus is still getting one step ahead. You know, what's the latest? It's now testing positive in frozen food. Like, shit. This virus is a bastard. But Will Hodgman, the insider. Well, that was the rumour going around that he got a message direct from the president of China saying, we're releasing this beast, get the hell out of your role while you can. But no, he didn't know anything. It was just good timing. And it was good in a way too, because Gutwin came in as the new Premier and was fresh and hadn't had 6 years as Premier and, you know, getting worn out. He was ready to go. So, and also I think because Gutwin is, you know, very good with numbers, and he's a you know, was a really good treasurer. He's just got that sort of business focus, whereas Will's very humanitarian and emotional and a lot more into you know, emotive issues like women's rights and the environment and so on. And I think it would have been a nightmare for him. Oh, you're not starting it either. There's been a conspiracy theory from the day, whatever day, probably before it was declared a global pandemic. It was already, the rumour was already flowing around Tassie that, yeah, Will had a, you know, direct line to the Chinese president and had inside knowledge. And we were only laughing about it last weekend, you know, how ridiculous it was. Yeah, well, you know about him now. I've even doxed him in the chat. No, it doesn't matter. It's a public figure. We can talk about him. It's fine. My name's all over my channels. It's no secret. But yeah, that's a connection I've got. Yeah, exactly. The stars aligned. And, you know, if you actually look at the speech he gave when he resigned, the logic behind it was to get out midterms so that whoever the incoming Premier was would have a couple of years to find their feet in the role and sort of set up their own style and keep the ball moving. You know, like the state was doing incredibly well. We were in surplus. Our unemployment was the lowest in Australia. We had the fastest growing economy. Like, the state was is in really good shape. It's not like Will said, oh my God, the state's sinking, I'm jumping ship. He handed the ball over to Gutwin, and Gutwin just took it and kept running with it. Like, we were in a really good position. So it was a good time. It was a good time. Thanks, Scout Inquiry. I really appreciate it. It's a bit different to my other channel. Although the podcast episodes that I upload are comedy-based true crime episodes. Each week I look at a different topic. So last week it was crimes involving bums, and I mean bums as in your butt, your buttocks, not bums. And yeah, so there's a different it was the most rootable Premier. Oh my God, Ivy, you're hilarious. He's a good looking dude, and he's a nice guy too. He's very down to earth and grounded. And he was young, you know, he got into politics in his early 30s, and even as when he became Premier, he was 45. He was 45 years old and the 45th Premier of Tassie. And he was doing some good shit. Like, I used to travel a lot with my job, as many of you know, and I'd be at dinner parties in different states, and people didn't know my connection to him, and they'd be saying, if it got into a topic about politics, so many people would say, I wish we could pinch the Premier from Tasmania, and I used to chuckle, chuckle away. Oh my, Ivy, you said that out loud. Hey Tanny, I've got to reply to your beautiful message. I'm so sorry I haven't. I've been in town all day. In fact, I caught up with my brother today. We gave him a raised garden bed that he's going to grow some herbs and veggies in as his birthday present. And I had 10 bags of mulch and compost that had been bagged up for me that I picked up on the weekend, and I delivered the whole lot, including the aluminium garden bed down. He took the plants home with him last weekend, but took them down to his house, and he's like, do you need a hand? I was like, yeah, you won't believe how heavy. Like, they were looked like 5 kilo-ish size bags, but some of them weighed a ton. They were so heavy. One of the most rootable. I'll let him know you said that, Ivor. But he was a good look for Tassie, and he did some cool shit while he was Premier, but he also realised early on that he couldn't do everything he wanted to do. Oh, stop. I thought I was on camera, but I'm not. Here we go. You wish you could have pinched the ex-Tasmanian Premier. Here's a story for you about pinching my brother. When I lived in Adelaide, Will and his footy team came over to Adelaide on a footy trip one year, which happened to coincide with the grand final. And Geelong, who Will and I both support very passionately, were in the grand final with the West Coast Eagles. And my housemate at the time was a lingerie model. And so she's ironing something when all these young boys from Tassie are sort of walking in, pretty much ironing in lingerie. But anyway, she invited a couple of her other little lingerie model friends over as well, who were clothed. But anyway, we had this fantastic grand final day at my place, or at our place. And then the boys were great. Like, at the end of the day, they cleaned everything up, and they'd rocked up with flowers and stuff as a thank you for us. And all these Adelaide girls were going, oh my God, what is it with Tasmanian boys? Like, they're all really cute, but also they helped clean up. They gave us gifts and all the rest of it. Anyway, Will was the last one to leave. And before he left, Amanda, my housemate, said, before you leave, there's something I really want to do to you, but I want your permission to do it. And he's like, what? And he's got a Hodgman bum. And if you know the Hodgmans, you know what a Hodgman bum is. But anyway, she said, I really like your bum. Can I pinch it? And he was like, well, I guess so. So my housemate got to pinch my brother's butt before he left. Great story. But yeah, West Coast won that grand final. So it was a bit of a depressing end to the day. But I don't know, maybe Amanda's request to grab. I don't think she pinched it, actually. She just grabbed it. She did that sort of butt cheek kind of thing. I could have put that story in my Smooth Criminal podcast episode last week, Crimes Against Buttocks. It was a good episode if you haven't listened to it. There were all these cases of people that were terrorizing women by sort of stabbing them in the bum with needles, and it was bizarre. Hot ass Hodgmans. We've got duck bums. We've got duck bums. We've all got sway backs, and we've got these bums that sort of stick out and just are there asking to be pinched or grabbed. But yeah, Tanya, I'm so sorry I haven't. Your message warrants a beautiful response, and I got home and messaged a few other people, and I'm so sorry I haven't responded yet. But it was beautiful. I love your beautiful essays that you write. You should just start a channel and just read out the letters you send people. They're gorgeous. In fact, a few of you in chat are also great at writing lovely things. Why aren't you all doing your own channels? Before I wrap up, unless anyone wants to jump up on panel and just hang out, there was another article I was going to cover also on the ABC News website, which goes into a lot more detail about New South Wales Health, but essentially, of all of the people that contributed to this debacle, New South Wales Health made the most mistakes. And I called it weeks ago. I was like, New South Wales Health, not looking good for you. I believe that Brett Walker's made some recommendations about moving forward. to sort of improve like biosecurity arrangements. Also, he made a comment which was really interesting, that the state and federal government the state governments and the federal government need to communicate more with each other about their responsibilities and who makes what decisions when and where, because there were decisions that the federal government were responsible for, like even letting the passengers fly. That was actually a federal government issue. So it was an interesting part of the report where he was sort of saying that these different departments at both state and federal level all need to, so like say, for example, the federal health and the state health departments, they need to communicate more and have clear protocols about who does what and when and who reports to who. So that was quite interesting. It was sort of an acknowledgement that, the states have all kind of been running their own race a little bit, and that's why some decisions were made that were bad. And so I think that's kind of an interesting part of the report. It wasn't just about who fucked up. It was also, how do we fix things moving forward? What have we learned from this? And I might do another live about that where we can talk about that. Of course, we have still got the police investigation that's ongoing. There's also the class action. And I just wanted to mention there's a passenger called Jason O'Brien. This was only posted an hour ago, who survived it, like an older guy, but, got wheeled out of the hospital in Dubbo. He was in like a bad way. But he thinks that he's 79. I'm just trying to find a quote. He's part of the class action too, so we'll talk more about Jason O'Brien down the track. Doesn't care about money. He just wants someone to be held responsible, and, if there's a chance for him to get some sort of, I hate using the word closure, but if the class action does deem a certain party to be liable, that will give him peace of mind, I guess. So he's not really happy with the inquiry because the inquiry didn't say it's all your fault and blame New South Wales Health alone. It wasn't enough for him. And I think a lot of the people in the class action would feel the same way. He has accepted Gladys's apology. He says the buck stops with the Premier. I understand that. But someone else was in control of that situation, and that someone has to pay for it. The New South Wales Health Minister too, Brad Hazard, who's in the chat that had a really funny nickname for him, is it do I have dimples in the back? Yes, we do have those little back dimples. We do. I'm not going to show them to you, but yeah, we do. It is my fault that you get all the voice messages. Yes. I doubt it, Cherie. You're an absolute stunner. Don't you dare say that. I used to model with Cherie, and I was like standing next to this absolute tall, lean, gorgeous glamazon, thinking, what am I doing here on this catwalk? Like, Cherie clearly belonged on it. I was like, what am I doing standing next to this glamazon? I used to get some voice messages too, but Tanny, I get beautiful letters now. Buzzard, that's it. Yeah, so he apologized too. I meant to mention that earlier. And he did apologize, but he also went on to say, because he can't help but be a little bit of a CUNT, look at what's happening in other parts of the world. Look at what's happening in Victoria. If you look at the big fuck-ups everywhere else, you got to admit we're not the worst. Don't you love an apology that comes with a disclaimer or a bit more buck passing? So, yeah. Clearly, New South Wales Health staff are doing a very significant job to keep us safe. Well, they are, but how about you just apologise and not say that another state of the country is more fucked up than you are. I don't know. I'd be with Jason. I don't know whether Jason O'Brien gave a flying flip about Brad's apology. And then the New South Wales Police Commissioner Mick Fuller has confirmed the criminal investigation is still underway, but won't say where the charges will be laid. There are tens of thousands of documents that have been sourced. There are surveys and interviews. They've interviewed 1,200 people so far for the inquiry, the police investigation. There's also a really good article in the Australian. It is a free article online. You don't have to be a subscriber to open it. It's not a long one, but it does just go through the litany of errors that led to the Ruby Princess wreck, the wreck of. But there we go. We've hit the hour mark. See you, Mel. Go cook dinner. Tanny in her messages. I take full responsibility for that. I did teach Tanny how to do that. I love it because I love her accent. Oh, everyone's got the sway back with the dimples. We're good. So yeah, that's it. Unless anyone has any questions, if there's anything that I haven't covered that I said, no, I've covered everything. That's where we are with the wreck of. Obviously, watch this space. I will let you know as soon as anything else comes out. I'll go live about it. Interesting, that some cruise companies are now in the spotlight and being criticised for planning to set sail in a matter of weeks. Tori, you modelled as... Yeah. I was what's known in the industry as a real model. I was, the average looking chick with the average figure that got up on the catwalk to show that even normal people can look nice in these outfits. That was me. I was one of those. Oh, thank you, Cherie. Well, Cherie and I had so much fun though together. Like the best thing that came out of that modeling experience was our friendship, Cherie. It was great. It was good fun. And we sold a lot of clothes. People bought clothes because they did have real models. The girl that we modeled for was smart. She had hot young like models, like one of Cherie's daughter strutting around doing the full professional model kind of thing, but she was clever and she had real models doing the catwalk too. But Cherie was quite the glamazon, I gotta say. The Four Corners comment that Claire Bear mentioned, is that another one or the one that was on a few weeks ago? Because the last time I went live, I talked about the Four Corners one. Is there a new one about the inquiry, Claire Bear? The future Kardashian, go you on the catwalk. I have done a fair bit, Francesca. I have. That's just the way I am. I'm weird. Spent all that time studying to become a lawyer, started working as a lawyer, and then I'm like, Triple J Raw Comedy, hell yeah, I'm there. And off I went. And then breakfast radio, bring it on. And then it was like, real estate, let's give that a crack. Yeah, I've made some good and some bad decisions. Real models do rock, Mel. It's great. There's so many of them now too. I keep thinking I want to show you guys. Oh, I wanted to see if there's a new Four Corners show. Hang on. And just another plug, I'm going to put this link back into chat too. If anyone does want to tune in tomorrow night on ABC 936, which is the Tassie ABC station, I'm being interviewed at 9:10 p.m. tomorrow night by my fabulous former colleague and very good friend, Mel Bush. She does evenings on ABC. It does stream live online if you want to tune in. It'll be 9:10 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, talking about the Smooth Criminal podcast. Woohoo! So I'll do a shout out to you, Groovers. Just want to pop the link over on Facebook Land too. That's tomorrow night. If you do miss it, you can listen to it for a week. It'll be online. And the other thing was, Claire might have answered it, but if it's Outbreak on Board, that's the one I've seen already, which is so good. And that's the one I talked about in the last episode. But if there's a new one, it's not showing. News. Oh no. Yeah, May 26th, the same one, I think. But it was really, really good. Really good. Night, Claire Bear. Night, Cherie. Thanks everyone for hanging out. And yeah, there we go. New South Wales Health were deemed to be the biggest players, I guess, in this debacle. But there was a series of unfortunate incidences that led to it. It wasn't one gigantic fuck up. It was a lot of little ones. And the cumulative effect was, well, the wreck of the Ruby Princess. You're going to prank me? No, you're not. Mel, I'm going to warn Mel. She won't take her calls during an interview. I hope. I'm going to be like, Mel, she's like a sister to me, that girl. I'll be like, don't you take any calls. You'll have to go through her producer too. You'll have to sound like some sort of authority on podcasts or something to get put through. I don't think they take calls, do they? I don't know. You're going to listen to the bum episode. Yeah, well, I'm going to get on with writing the episode that I'm recording tomorrow for Wednesday. Hit the like button and the subscribe if you're not subscribed to this channel. It's not as active as my other one, but there is a weekly episode of my podcast. And after the Ruby Princess stuff finishes, all the other investigations and so on, I'll find another Australian thing to start following. I am still umming and ahhing about the quarantine thing because that's so juicy. But I don't know. I might just do an episode on that rather than follow it. But yes, stay groovy, everyone. And remember, don't get hit by, don't get struck by a smooth criminal. See you soon, everyone. I always do this. You know Hugh Grant in Love Actually? He stands out 10 Downing Street and he's like that, waving when he's just become Prime Minister. And then he goes and says, I've got to work on the wave. Got to work on my wave.